Most girls get candles and cake on their birthday. I got a chain. It was still dark when I woke, though. In the basement, dark was the norm. The flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead, washing the cracked cement walls in a pale, sickly glow. The mattress beneath me reeked of mildew, its springs poking my back like they too resented my presence. I pulled the thin, damp blanket tighter, bracing against the October cold that crept in like a ghost. Then came the sound. Metal clinking. Measured, deliberate. I sat up. My heartbeat quickened. I didn't have to wonder what it was. I already knew. It was the same sound from last year when I'd turned 15 and the year before that. But this time it was louder. Sharper. Almost ceremonial. The door creaked open. My father stood in the frame, a thick iron chain in one hand, a bolt lock in the other. He didn't look at me at first, he just walked in. Like this was normal. Like this was breakfast. Feet, he said, voice flat. I stayed still. I said feet. I obeyed. The concrete bit into my skin as I slid to the edge of the mattress, holding out my right leg. I didn't shake. Not anymore. Shaking was for people who thought it might help. He knelt and shackled my ankle to the rusted base of the water heater, yanking the chain to test its give. Maybe 12 inches of movement max. Just enough to reach the bucket in the corner, not enough to stand fully. There, he said, satisfied. Wouldn't want the birthday girl wandering off. He stood, dusted off his hands, and turned to go. You know what today is, right? He asked, pausing at the steps. I didn't answer. October 15th. He said anyway. The worst day of my life. The door slammed. I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned back against the wall, pulling my knees up to my chest. The metal was cold against my skin, the shackle just loose enough to chafe when I moved. I let my eyes close, not to sleep, but to slow my breath. 1 inhale, 2, 3. It was the only trick I had. Not to cry, not to scream. Mistakes don't get cake. That's what he'd said when I was 10 after I'd asked why there weren't balloons like the neighbor's kid had. Mistakes get silence. Or worse, mockery served cold. The worst part? My mother agreed. Or at least, she never argued. She played her part like someone reading a script written by fear and submission. At 6:14 a.m. she arrived. No knock, no glance. She opened the door, stepped down 2 stairs, and tossed a plastic bag in my direction. It landed with a dull thud and rolled halfway across the concrete. I didn't move to grab it. Breakfast, she muttered. Happy birthday. I waited until the door shut behind her before crawling forward. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but because I already knew what I'd find. Inside the bag, a moldy slice of white bread 2 days past its death. No butter, no water, just decay. The green blotches spread like moss. I stared at it for a full minute before pushing it aside. I wasn't hungry. This was the 3rd year in a row they'd pulled something like this. But something felt different now. Maybe because I wasn't 15 anymore. Maybe because the way he said the worst day of my life had finally lost its sting. Or maybe because I'd started to see the cracks in their fortress. Rachel would say they were cowards. I could still hear her voice from that one summer we spent together when I was 8 before she disappeared from my life entirely. If people are mean to you, Em, it's 'cause they're scared you'll grow up better than them. Back then, I didn't believe her. Now I think she might have been right. Because lately I had been watching, listening, learning, not just surviving. The heater clicked as it fired up. The sound was soft, mechanical, one of the few noises that didn't threaten me. They thought the chain would break me, that by limiting my movement they'd limit my will. But chains can rust. Chains can be picked. Chains can remind you where the door is and what you have to do to walk through it. I leaned back again and looked up at the light. It buzzed, flickered, held on. I would too. But what they didn't know was, I had a plan too. And today, it starts. Before the basement, there was silence. And before silence, there was erasure. I used to have a room. With blue walls and a string of fairy lights, I hung up myself, even though the ceiling was too high for me to reach without dragging in a kitchen stool. It wasn't much, just a twin bed, a desk I'd rescued from a yard sale, and a window that faced the neighbor's fence. But it was mine. Until it wasn't. 3 months ago, the door was locked one morning and the knob was gone by the afternoon. When I asked why, Linda, my mother, said it had always been her dream to have a craft studio. As if that made it okay. As if dreams required the sacrifice of mine. I left your things in boxes, she'd said with a shrug. You can go through them later. Besides, you don't spend time in there anyway. She was right in a way. I had stopped spending time in my room. Because no matter where I went in this house, the atmosphere was the same, dense, electric with disappointment. My existence wasn't welcome, just tolerated. Like a stain they hadn't found the right cleaner for. I hadn't thought about that moment in weeks. But now, lying in the basement with the moldy bread beside me and my legs shackled like a feral dog's, it all came back. Because erasure always precedes imprisonment. First, they ignore your words. Then your presence. Then your freedom. There had been so many signs. The field trip to Washington, D.C. I never went. I told Jasmine P. that my parents were too busy to fill out the forms. That was half true. The real reason they forgot, and when I reminded them, Dad barked. No one wants to babysit a waste of space on a bus for 5 hours. So I stayed home that Friday and watched through the blinds as the other kids boarded the school buses in matching hoodies. I'd begged Linda to write me a sick note. She said lying only teaches you how to become a victim. Then she left for yoga. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's cake. The bread was still there, growing softer in all the wrong ways. I pushed it farther away. Instead, I reached inward toward the only source of warmth I had left. Rachel. Aunt Rachel. My dad's younger sister had always been the one adult who treated me like a person. She lived 2 towns over in a bright yellow bungalow that smelled like lavender and garlic bread. She used to take me every summer until suddenly she didn't. Until one day her name stopped being mentioned at all. No fights, no explanation, just gone. But a few weeks ago, I'd managed to sneak my phone off the top shelf where Linda kept it for safekeeping. I didn't have a charger, but I had a few seconds of power, just enough to see one missed message. From Rachel. Hey Em, dinner next Friday, I'll be in town. 6 p.m. Same place. Please come. I replayed the voicemail in my head now. Word for word. The soft lilt of her voice, the kindness that didn't sound forced. The kind of warmth you forgot existed until someone offered it again. I had asked permission that night. Stupid, I know. Charles laughed first. One of those deep, chesty, mean laughs that come from people who never learned how to laugh at anything except someone else's expense. You think you get to go out? Who the hell do you think you are? Linda didn't laugh. She just smirked and said, You should be thankful you even have a roof. Going out is a privilege. I didn't ask again. But that message, it never left me. It was still there in the folds of my memory like a paper crane tucked into the dark. And today was the day. Friday, October 15th. 6 p.m. She might still go to that restaurant. She might wait. She might leave. But if she noticed I wasn't there, if she remembered I'd said yes, maybe she'd wonder. Maybe she'd come looking. That thought sparked something. Small, but steady. I could make myself noticed. Somehow. I looked around the basement. The same 4 corners. The same dented water heater, the same bucket in the corner, the same mattress now damp with cold. But somewhere in this hellhole I had one advantage. I reached under the mattress slowly, cautiously. My fingers brushed against metal. There, a sharpened hairpin. I'd hidden it there 4 weeks ago after Linda had dropped it on the floor during one of her downward glances and told me to throw it out. I didn't. I had filed it down little by little using the rust on the water heater's bolts. Not enough to escape, not yet, but enough to remind myself that escape was possible. I held it in my palm, feeling the cool metal bite against my skin, not for defense, not yet, but for intent, for control. I could scratch a message. On the pipe. On the floor. Or I could wait and use it to break something small, just enough to create doubt in their minds. Just enough to suggest I wasn't as powerless as they thought. A creak came from upstairs. I quickly slid the pin back into the slit I'd carved beneath the mattress lining. Voices. Muffled. Then quiet. I lay back, closing my eyes again, forcing my breath into rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. Quiet. Still. They thought I was chained. They forgot my mind was still free. There's a kind of cruelty in the way joy floats through floorboards. It started just after 11:00 a.m. The sun must have climbed high enough to warm the top level of the house because the usual chill that lingered in the basement seemed to press down harder, like it knew I didn't belong to the same world above. And then I heard it tinny and bright, a game show theme song trickling down through the air vents, punctuated by applause and exaggerated laughter. My stomach turned. Not from hunger, not exactly, but from the sound of people cheering while I was shackled to a rusted pipe. Somewhere above me, Charles was probably parked on the recliner with his arms crossed and his mouth chewing, loud and satisfied. Linda would be perched at the kitchen island, legs crossed like a bird of prey, sipping her diet soda and shouting answers at the screen. Another wave hit me, not the show, but the smell. Pizza. It started faint like a ghost memory, then stronger. Thick, buttery hot. Garlic. Cheese. Something meaty, pepperoni, maybe sausage. My stomach clenched so sharply it knocked the breath out of me. They ordered pizza. They always did that on Fridays. I'd forgotten. Back when I was allowed to sit at the table years ago now, we used to eat it with paper plates and a roll of paper towels between us. But now it felt like a broadcast. Every scent molecule was an insult. And yet I couldn't stop breathing it in. Hunger. It wasn't just about food anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I was hungry for proof that someone remembered I existed. That someone knew I had a birthday today. That I mattered. Instead, I had air ducts and echoes. The chains rattled softly as I shifted to press my back against the wall, legs drawn in tight to conserve warmth. The metal around my ankle burned from friction, where I'd been unconsciously rubbing it. I stopped, closed my eyes, and began counting again. Inhale. 1. Exhale. 2. Inhale. 3. It was the only rhythm I controlled. They thought the hunger would weaken me, but hunger was a teacher. It showed me how to listen, how to wait, how to plan. I'd begun rehearsing what I would scream if I ever got the timing right. Not just random yelling that would be ignored. I needed words that stuck, phrases that made the listener stop, reconsider. Help, I'm locked in the basement. Too generic. They'd dismiss it as a prank. My name is Emily. I'm 16. My father chained me to the heater. Better. More details, but risky. If Charles or Linda heard me practicing, they'd escalate. Call Rachel Williams. She knows me. That one had potential. It added credibility. A witness. But the biggest question was when. Timing was everything. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor, often worked in her front garden on weekends. She had soft gray hair and wore lavender gardening gloves, always waving at cars but never speaking much. I doubted she knew I even lived here. Still, if she was outside and they left the window cracked. I filed it away. Strategy, not panic. Footsteps thudded above. Then voices. Oh, come on. He totally got that question wrong. Charles. He never liked to be wrong, even when he wasn't playing. Hydration's important, Charles, especially if she wants to live long enough to regret being born. Linda, cold and clinical. Then came the thunk of the basement door opening. I didn't move. I never moved when I heard it. Show no reaction. No reward. Something plastic bounced down the stairs, a water bottle. It rolled halfway across the floor and stopped at my foot. I picked it up. The plastic was hot. They must have left it in the car. I twisted off the cap and sniffed. Warm, slightly metallic. The taste would be flat and unpleasant. I didn't care. I took one sip, just enough to coat my throat, and set it aside. There was no kindness in the gesture. It was mockery disguised as maintenance. The minimum needed to keep me alive and hurting. Hydration's important. I could still hear her voice. Crisp, clinical. As if she were reading it off a chart, diagnosing her daughter like a case study instead of a person. I turned to the mattress, then reached for the loose panel underneath. The hairpin was still there, still safe. Its sharp edge glinted faintly in the flickering light. I wouldn't use it today. Not yet. Upstairs, the front door opened. I heard laughter keys jangling, then the door closing again. Silence followed. The game show had stopped. The house had emptied. I crawled to the edge of the heater's radius and strained to listen. Nothing. They were going out now. Which means the real performance can begin. Desperation is noise. Strategy is rhythm. I waited until I was sure the car had left the driveway. Until the slam of the door above was followed by a silence that didn't shift. No footsteps, no voices. Just the hum of the old refrigerator upstairs and the buzz of electricity keeping the fluorescent light above me blinking like it had a nervous tick. 3:00 p.m. I counted every minute like a chess clock. My throat still tasted like copper from the last time I screamed too long. A waste. I'd yelled until I was dizzy, but it hadn't mattered. Screaming without structure is just sound. It disappears into wind, into drywall, into air vents and empty ears. But rhythm can be remembered. I'd found a battered book at the public library last year. I'd snuck it into my backpack before they revoked my card for misusing resources. Morse code, old military history, SOS, distress signals, patterns made of pressure and pause. So today I screamed in threes, not long screams, not manic ones, just help, pause, help, pause, help, then silence. I waited, counted to 15, repeated. I did it again, again, again. After the 5th set, my voice started to crack. By the 7th, I felt the blood in my throat. By the 10th, I couldn't tell if the silence afterward was because no one heard or because someone did and chose not to act. I pictured Mrs. Patterson. She lived next door in a pale yellow house with wind chimes on the porch. She pruned her hedges every Friday at 3:30 p.m. like it was a holy ritual. She was probably out there now trimming azaleas and humming a forgotten tune. She might have heard. She might have paused. But would she care? Would I, if I were her? Still repeat. Scream. 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 Wait. Again. The light above flickered faster now, matching my pulse. I leaned against the heater, wrapping my fingers around the chain as if it could anchor me through the dizziness. My body felt like it was peeling, inward layers coming apart from inside my chest. But I kept going. I had to. By 5:00 p.m., my voice was barely more than a rasp. My eyes watered. My breath came shallow. The air had grown cold again, and the shadows in the corners deepened like bruises on the walls. I whispered a count under my breath. 1, 2, 3. Again. Help. 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 The words didn't feel like words anymore. They became drum beats in my mouth. Morse code for hope. At 5:30 I stopped. There was a strange stillness in the air. Not empty exactly, more like waiting. My ears strained toward the ceiling. Nothing. Then tires. The slow crunch of rubber over gravel. A car. Not fast like someone in a hurry, but careful. Heavy. Familiar. I crawled forward as far as the chain allowed, close enough to the bottom of the staircase that I could see the faint outline of light beneath the door. A car door opened. closed. Footsteps. Not Charles. Not Linda. Too light. Quicker. Then a pause. The steps reached the porch. The rustle of a coat, maybe a bag. A knock sharp direct. Then another. Emily. My heart stuttered. Emily, are you in there? Her voice was older than I remembered, but it was hers. Rachel. She knocked again. It's me. It's Rachel. Your aunt. I need you to answer, sweetheart. I scrambled upright, nearly slipping on the cement. The chain yanked tight, pulling me down again, but I didn't care. Here I shouted louder than I thought I could. I'm here. The voice outside froze. Then, where are you? I'm downstairs. The basement. They chained me down here. Silence. Then the sound of keys rattling. Emily, stay with me, she said, and her voice broke. I'm going to get you out. Right now. I didn't have anything left. Not breath, not sound. But I summoned it anyway, dragged it from the pit of my lungs. Help, I'm chained in the basement, I scream with my last breath. Freedom didn't crash in it, crept quietly wearing a badge. I heard the front door burst open, but not like in the movies. There was no explosion, no shouting of, go, go, go. Just the soft thud of a battering ram and the splintering of old wood giving way. Then voices, low, measured, official. Boots creaked on linoleum. A radio crackled. Someone called out clear. And then footsteps on the basement stairs. I didn't move. I couldn't. My whole body was frozen in a strange, suspended state between disbelief and exhaustion. The room tilted slightly, or maybe it was just my blood pressure dropping. Either way, I gripped the chain tighter as if letting go would unravel me entirely. Emily, a male voice called halfway down the stairs. Emily, can you hear me? My name is Officer Mason. I'm with the local police department. We're here to help you, all right? I blinked hard, tried to sit up straighter. I'm here, I croaked. My voice barely made it past the dryness in my throat. 2 flashlights swung into the basement. I squinted against the sudden brightness. The officers wore dark blue uniforms, vests strapped tightly to their chests. One of them, a tall man with kind eyes and a short dark beard, rushed forward when he saw the chain around my ankle. Oh my God, he muttered almost under his breath. James, get the bolt cutters. Another voice responded from behind. Already on it. Within seconds, someone knelt beside me. EMT, judging by the Navy uniform and the Red Cross patch on his shoulder. He looked young, early 20s maybe, and his hands were already gloved as he began checking my vitals. Can you tell me your name? He asked, shining a small light into my eyes. Emily. Good. You're doing great, Emily. Stay with me. There was a sudden clatter as the chain gave way. Officer Mason stood holding the broken shackle in one hand, like evidence from a crime scene. His face was hard now, sharp with a kind of fury he hadn't shown before. Got it? He said into his radio. Subject is secure. Minor injury to left ankle, possible dehydration. House is empty. Rachel's voice followed before the radio even went silent. Emily. I barely had time to look up before she was there, running into the basement, barefoot, her cardigan slipping off one shoulder, eyes red and wild. Oh my God. Oh, Em. She dropped to her knees in front of me, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in years. Pure, unfiltered love. No questions. No hesitation. Just arms around me, holding me like she was afraid I'd vanish. I'm here, she whispered again and again. I'm here. I should have come sooner. I didn't cry. Not yet. But something inside me cracked. I remembered what you said, I murmured. About if something felt wrong. Rachel pulled back just enough to look into my face. And it was wrong. So wrong. But you're safe now. The EMT James cut away the remnants of the ankle shackle-wrapped gauze around the raw, bleeding skin. Another officer took photos. Of the chain, the mattress, the bread. Every corner of the basement like it was a crime scene. Because it was. Let's get you upstairs, James said softly. We've got a stretcher waiting. They helped me to my feet. I stumbled once Rachel caught me, and they half-carried, half-guided me up the basement stairs. Each step felt like climbing out of a grave. The main floor looked different, colder, exposed. Police tape fluttered in the hallway. Someone had opened all the windows and fresh air drifted in like judgment. Outside, the sky had begun to soften. Pink streaks bled into gray. An ambulance idled in the driveway, lights spinning but silent. They wrapped me in a thermal blanket and eased me onto the stretcher. For a moment, the world tilted again, but I blinked and focused on Rachel, who was right beside me, gripping my hand. Officer Mason leaned in. "Emily, I need to ask, where are your parents right now?" I looked straight at him. "They went out," I said. "Said they didn't want to be here for my pity party." The officer's jaw clenched. He nodded once, then turned to speak into his radio again. They slid me into the ambulance. The door hadn't even closed when I heard it, the low, familiar growl of an engine. Down the road, headlights cut through the trees. The rumble of Charles's truck returning. They unchained my ankle, but the bruises would speak louder than I ever could. I lay on a hospital bed that smelled like bleach and plastic, staring at the soft ceiling tiles, dotted with tiny brown stains like memories that refused to fade. The fluorescent lights were gentler here, not like the buzzsaw glare of the basement bulb. Still, I flinched every time a door opened, every time shoes squeaked against linoleum. Rachel hadn't left my side. She sat in the corner, hunched over her phone, tapping out messages between sips of lukewarm coffee. Her cardigan was stained with something, maybe the dirt from the basement floor, maybe tears. She looked 10 years older than she had that morning. Nurses came in waves. They examined me carefully, methodically, like I was a puzzle with missing pieces. Bruises on my arms, old and yellowed. A fresh one along my ribcage where I'd slipped on the concrete weeks ago. My ankle raw and inflamed, now wrapped in gauze again. Weight dangerously low, blood pressure erratic. I was officially a medical chart. They noted everything. Not with alarm, but with precision. As if my body itself had become a report. James, the EMT from earlier, checked in once more just for a moment. "You're doing great," he said, gently adjusting the IV line in my arm. "We've got you now." I nodded but said nothing. I didn't trust my voice to hold. At some point, a woman with kind brown eyes and a clipboard came in. She introduced herself as Ms. Alvarez, social worker. "I'm here just to talk," she said. "Nothing scary. We want to help." She didn't wear a suit. Just jeans, a soft sweater, and a pendant in the shape of a sun. "Can I ask you a few questions?" she said. "And you can stop anytime. Is that okay?" I nodded again. We started with names, dates, simple things that didn't make my hands shake. But then she asked, "Has this happened before?" And I hesitated. Because yes. Of course yes. There had been times before the chain. Slaps. Screamed words. Days without food. Accidents, they called them. Charles said I fell down the stairs. Linda blamed a growth spurt for my weight loss. But I hadn't fallen. I hadn't grown. I'd just been erased. "There were signs," I said slowly. "I told my counselor once 2 years ago." "And what happened?" She said I was dramatic. That my parents were stressed. Everyone was back then. Miss Alvarez's lips pressed into a thin line. "Do you remember who that counselor was?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Mrs. Green." She wrote it down. "You've done everything right, Emily," she said. "And this time, we're listening." The door creaked again, and a tall man in a button-down shirt stepped inside. He wore a badge clipped to his belt and carried a small leather notebook. He introduced himself as Detective Franklin. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, offering a quick smile. "I just need to ask a few follow-ups, if you're up for it." Rachel looked up sharply. She's still being treated. "I understand. We'll keep it brief." He pulled a chair close but not too close. I read the initial statement. I need to confirm a few things with you directly. I sat up straighter. You said they kept you in the basement. I nodded. For how long? I looked away. 3 months. Since July. His pen scratched across the page. And were you ever let out number bathroom access? There was a bucket, I whispered. He stopped writing for a moment. Just looked at me. Not with pity, something heavier. Did you have access to food sometimes? Not much. Moldy bread? A water bottle every few days. He exhaled slowly. And this wasn't the first time you were mistreated, no. Just the first time anyone cared. That stopped him cold. He looked at Rachel, then at Ms. Alvarez. Rachel's eyes were glossy, but she stayed quiet. Ms. Alvarez's voice was soft. Detective, do you want to pause? But he shook his head. No. One more question, if I may. He turned to me. Do you feel safe right now? I thought about it. Really thought. The chain was gone. The door was open. But something inside me still waited for footsteps. Still flinched at certain tones of voice. I didn't know if safety was something you just felt, or something you rebuilt. I don't know, I said. But I think I will. Rachel reached across the bed and took my hand. Detective Franklin nodded once, closing his notebook. He stood. We'll need to talk again. This is bigger than neglect. Apparently, even moldy bread has legal weight if it's presented correctly. It sat on the stainless steel evidence table inside a thick Ziploc bag, green fuzz blooming across the crust like an accusation. The chain rusted and coiled like a snake rested beside it in another bag. A third held the padlock, its key still jammed inside, as if reluctant to let go of what it had kept. The fluorescent lights above hummed, casting shadows over each object like ghosts of the basement they came from. I stood behind the one-way glass in the observation room, Rachel at my side. She didn't say anything at first, just watched as the officers cataloged everything. Officer Mason was there too, talking quietly to a young woman typing furiously into a laptop. Detective Franklin paced in a slow arc, arms crossed, his eyes, scanning each item with clinical focus. Is that really it? I whispered. That's all it takes. A bag of trash and a chain. Rachel's voice was gentle. It's not trash when it tells the truth. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full-charged. I watched Mason hold the bread up to the light. Even through the plastic, I could see the curve of a thumbprint pressed into the loaf's side. I knew it was hers, Linda's. She'd flung it at me from the top of the stairs and laughed. Here's your cake, princess, she'd said. Like it was a joke. Like I was the joke. Hey, Rachel said, nudging me with her elbow, you okay? I nodded too quickly. Yeah, I'm just watching. Which was true. But it was more than that. I wasn't just watching. I was learning. Later, in the waiting area outside the precinct, I sat curled in a plastic chair with a blanket still wrapped around my shoulders. The hospital bracelet itched, but I didn't take it off. It felt like proof that someone had seen me, checked me, written me down as real. Detective Franklin returned, rubbing his temples with 2 fingers. We finished the first round of processing, he said. Photographs are logged. Chain padlock bread tagged and sealed. Should be enough to begin the case file. Rachel leaned forward. Case file. So this is going to court. He nodded. It's criminal abuse, possibly felony level depending on what else we uncover. There's precedent for this sort of prolonged confinement. And the bruising, that supports it. I swallowed hard. Even though I knew it was coming, hearing the word felony made everything feel heavier. Have you found them yet? I asked. Franklin hesitated. Not yet. Their truck was seen heading north, but we've issued a statewide BOLO. They'll be found. Rachel glanced at me, then asked. In the meantime, I want to file for emergency guardianship. His expression shifted, respect maybe, or gratitude. Good. That'll help stabilize things for Emily. I'll put you in touch with a family law attorney. Rachel nodded, already pulling out her phone. I've got someone. I watched her fingers dance across the screen. Efficient. Fierce. Like she'd been preparing for this fight long before she knew it was hers. Across the room, two officers passed by, speaking in low voices. I only caught a few words, but they stopped me cold. Yeah, and they joked about this in texts. My head snapped up. What I asked aloud, but they were already around the corner. I looked at Franklin. He paused. You heard that they joked. I said louder now. They joked about locking me up. He exchanged a look with Mason, who'd reappeared behind him. We're just starting to review the contents of their phones, Franklin said carefully. But yes, there are messages between your parents that suggest prior intent. Sarcasm mostly, but enough to raise red flags. My mouth was dry, like what I can't show you yet. But the implication is that this wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. I sat back in the chair, my spine pressing into the hard plastic. A strange kind of heat moved through my body, not fear, not sadness. Something like strategy. They weren't just cruel, they were careless. And that might be the thread that unraveled everything. Franklin's phone buzzed. He checked it, eyes narrowing. He looked at me, then at Rachel. We've subpoenaed their phone records. Monsters don't knock when they come home, they barge in demanding answers. The distant roar of Charles's truck had always sent a ripple through my spine, an instinct sharpened by years of knowing what came after the engine cut off. But tonight, as the sirens faded and the ambulance doors remained open, that sound didn't paralyze me. It focused me. From the gurney, I had a full view of the driveway. The red and blue lights of the squad cars bathed the front of our house in pulses like a heartbeat. Rachel stood beside me, one hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Her eyes never left the front walk. The headlights cut through the dark. Charles's truck skidded into the driveway too fast. It came to a stop a few feet from the officers. He got out, slamming the door hard enough to make the whole vehicle shudder. What the hell is going on? He barked, his voice instantly punching through the night. Why are there cops at my house? Linda climbed out slowly, her body hunched like she already knew the answer. She didn't meet anyone's gaze. Officer Mason was the first to approach. Sir, please, step back. We need to speak with you. Charles didn't budge. This is my damn house. You don't tell me to step back? What's this about? Detective Franklin stepped into the light, then calm but implacable. Charles Meadows, you are being placed under arrest for suspected felony child abuse, unlawful imprisonment, and endangerment of a minor. The color drained from Linda's face. Charles took a step forward. What the hell are you talking about? He snapped. She's lying. She's a manipulative brat, always has been. Mason stepped between them. Hands where I can see them, sir. She's got everyone fooled. Charles spat, pointing toward me like I was some parasite clinging to their lives. We were trying to discipline her, trying to make her better. That's not a crime. Linda, still standing near the truck, finally spoke. Her voice was small. We were protecting her. Rachel's breath caught beside me. My heart didn't race. It just steadied. Franklin pulled out a small folder and flipped it open. His tone was even, almost bored. We have copies of text messages between the two of you, dated July 4th. You referred to Emily as a mistake. You joked that you couldn't wait to gift her what she deserved. Charles's eyes went wild. You're twisting that. You don't know what it meant. I think a jury will understand it perfectly, Franklin replied. Two officers stepped forward, cuffing Charles's wrists behind his back. He resisted at first, jerking his arm out, but another officer pinned his shoulder until he complied. Linda didn't fight. When they took her hands, she didn't flinch. She just looked at me, then quickly looked away. I didn't blink. I didn't look down. I didn't hide from it. They were led to separate squad cars, neither of them saying another word. Charles's jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. Linda's eyes brimmed with something, not regret, not guilt, something more fragile. like confusion at her own unraveling. The cuffs clicked, the doors shut, the cars idled preparing to drive away. I leaned my head toward Rachel, still watching. "This is the first birthday gift I ever wanted," I whispered. By morning, my name wasn't just on a birth certificate, it was on the news. The television was already on when I padded into Rachel's kitchen wrapped in one of her oversized cardigans and clutching a chipped mug of weak coffee. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the basement, the glare of the fluorescent bulb, the chain biting into my skin. But now the basement was behind me, and I stood in a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon instead of mildew. On screen, a news anchor's voice carried across the room, cool and measured, as if she were reading a recipe. And in a developing story out of Greene County, a 16-year-old girl was rescued yesterday evening after being found shackled in the basement of her family home. Her parents, Charles and Linda Meadows, were arrested on site and now face charges including felony child abuse and unlawful imprisonment. My photo. My school ID flashed on the screen. Me in a hoodie, hair pulled back, eyes a little too guarded for the yearbook. Rachel muted the TV as soon as she saw me watching. "I didn't want you to wake up to that," she said. "But it's everywhere. I figured better you hear it here than from someone else." I nodded and sat at the kitchen table. My stomach was doing its best to behave, but the nausea that had become my constant companion hadn't left just because the chains had. I took a sip of coffee. It helped a little. The captions on the screen rolled on silently. "Teen chained on birthday. Moldy bread cake part of abuse pattern." I didn't need sound to hear it. That detail, the bread, was what people clung to. It was grotesque, visual meme, worthy. Reporters had latched onto the phrase I hated most. "Mistakes don't get cake." I watched it flash beneath my face like a tagline. Emily, Rachel's voice pulled me back. She was holding out her phone. "Text for you." I took it with a shaky hand. The screen read, "Jasmine P. Emily. Is that really you? I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Please tell me you're okay." Jasmine. We hadn't talked in over a year. The last time she messaged me, it was about a school project, and I'd lied and said I was sick. The truth was, I wasn't allowed to go. Or rather, I'd stopped asking. I didn't reply. Not yet. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but nothing felt right. Not sarcasm, not kindness, not anger. Just silence. Rachel placed a warm plate of toast in front of me. "Try to eat, even if it's just a bite." I nodded, chewing, automatically not tasting it. My eyes drifted to the pile of mail by the back door, an open envelope, some bills, a flyer. Then something caught my attention. A smaller envelope sealed. No return address. Just my name. In handwriting I recognized instantly. Charles. Rachel noticed me staring. "It came this morning." I almost threw it out. "Want me to?" I stared at it, the looping letters, the way he always wrote my name too big. I remembered those same letters on permission slips on birthday cards he never meant, on post-it notes stuck to my door telling me to shape up. "No," I said softly. "But I'm not reading it." Rachel nodded. "Good." We left it there unopened, like a relic from a life I no longer had to live. The doorbell rang sometime after noon. Ms. Alvarez stood there, clipboard in hand, her expression gentle but firm. She came to check on me, ask the questions that needed asking. We sat in the living room, and I answered her as best I could. Yes, I was safe now. No, I didn't feel like hurting myself. Yes, Rachel had been caring for me. No, I didn't want to go back. At some point I realized I was saying no more than yes. But that too felt like a kind of strength. When Ms. Alvarez left, I retreated to the couch, pulling the cardigan tighter around me. The muted TV was still running the news cycle, looping through political scandal, weather, traffic. And then it came back to me. A new anchor, now same tone. Trial date pending. Charges include felony child abuse and unlawful imprisonment. They tried to burn me down. I learned how to walk through flames. The therapist's office smelled like lavender. Not the fake kind from a plug-in, but something real. Maybe a diffuser or a candle that had burned out hours ago. It clung softly to the bookshelves, to the couch I sat on, and to the warm mug of tea that Dr. Ingram handed me without a word. I hadn't said much the first time we met. Just stared at the framed quote above her head that read, "Speak, even if your voice shakes." It felt like someone else's mantra, not mine. But today was different. Today, the phantom weight around my ankle pulsed. I'd slept without the chain for days now, but the ache was still there. Psychological, maybe. Maybe not. Dr. Ingram sat across from me, legs crossed, pen still capped. "Want to start where we left off?" I nodded slowly. I used to scream into a pillow. Not because I thought someone would hear, but because I knew no one would. She didn't interrupt, just tilted her head, encouraging. I felt like I could set myself on fire and they'd tell me to stop making a scene. Dr. Ingram's eyes didn't widen. She didn't flinch. Instead, she said, "Sometimes people don't hear you until you catch fire, but that doesn't make the blaze your fault." My throat tightened. And now she asked gently, "Now people listen, but it's like, I'm not sure if they're listening to me, or just the story." She nodded, then leaned forward slightly. "Your voice isn't just yours anymore, Emily. It's also evidence. That's heavy, but it can also be powerful." Her words settled somewhere deep in my chest. Back at Rachel's, sunlight filtered through the windows, soft and golden. She was waiting with a woman in a navy blazer, her hair pulled back into a neat bun and a leather case balanced on her lap. "Emily, this is Lila Burke," Rachel said. "She's with a law center that helps survivors. I wanted you to meet." Lila stood and extended a hand. "It's nice to meet you. I've read over some of the reports. I know this must be overwhelming." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, but kind. "I don't want to overwhelm you more," Lila continued, "but if you're comfortable, I'd like to represent you. Not just legally, but as your advocate in the process, court, media, anything that comes next." My palms were damp. "And if I'm not ready, you don't have to be ready," she said. "You just have to know that someone is standing with you." We sat together at the kitchen table while Rachel made tea again with that lavender scent. Lila opened her case and pulled out a folder. "These are the text messages," she said gently. "Between your parents. Some of them you've heard referenced. But if you're going to be involved in the legal process, you should see them." I hesitated, then nodded. She slid the papers across. I scanned them. Snippets of cruelty couched in sarcasm and emoji. One line over and over, "She's a mistake." Another one time-stamped 7:03 a.m. on October 15th. "Happy birthday to the mistake. Hope she likes her gift." The air went thin. I pushed the paper away. Rachel reached over and placed her hand on mine. "I want to testify," I said. The words left my mouth before I even realized they'd fully formed. I used to be afraid of rooms full of adults. Now they'd have to hear every word. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and anxiety. The pew-like benches creaked as people shuffled, whispering into one another's collars. Camera crews weren't allowed, but that didn't stop the courtroom from feeling like a stage. I stood at its center, hands folded tightly in front of me as I was sworn in. My name echoed through the room like a bell. Emily Jean Parker. 16 years old. The girl from the news. The one with the chain. Attorney Burke offered a reassuring nod from the prosecutor's table. I nodded back barely. The walk to the witness stand felt longer than it was. Every step pulsed in my ankle like the chain was still there. I could feel Linda's eyes not looking at me. I could feel Charles's rage like static against my skin. My parents. My jailers. The prosecutor adjusted the mic. "Emily, thank you for being here today. Can you tell us what happened on October 15th? I swallowed hard and looked out toward the judge. "It was my birthday," I said. "Most kids get candles or cake." I got a chain. A murmur rippled across the gallery. I didn't look at Rachel. I needed to keep my eyes forward. They brought me to the basement around 6 in the morning. My father shackled my ankle to the old water heater. My mother threw moldy bread at me and said, "Happy birthday, princess." Gasps now, audible ones. Someone in the back even muttered, "God." The prosecutor nodded gently. Did this treatment start on that day? No, I said, voice steadier than I expected. They'd been ignoring my birthdays for years. One time when I asked for cake, he said, "Mistakes don't get cake." My eyes swept over to Charles. He didn't flinch. The prosecutor approached the evidence screen. Photos popped up, high-resolution time-stamped. The chain, the stained mattress, the padlock etched with rust. And then the loaf of bread green-flecked and half-eaten by mold. Gasps again. A woman in the gallery put her hand over her mouth. "Do you recognize these items?" the prosecutor asked. "I lived with them," I said. "Every day." Linda still wouldn't look at me. Charles's jaw-ticked lips pressed so tight they looked blue. The prosecutor paused, then stepped aside. "Emily," the judge said, "do you have anything else you wish to say under oath?" I let out a breath. Yes. I looked straight at her, then out into the crowd. "They told me I was a mistake," I said. "They made me believe it for years. But this testimony proves they were wrong." There was no sound after that. Not even a creak. Not even a cough. The judge leaned forward. "This case is going to trial, and it will be open to the public. Truth doesn't just shatter lies, it shatters those who depend on them." The second day of trial began colder than the first, even though the temperature outside hadn't changed. Maybe it was the weight in the room, or maybe it was me. I'd told my story yesterday. Today wasn't about what I remembered, it was about what they'd written. Attorney Burke leaned toward me before the judge entered. "Stay focused. No matter what's read aloud, it's not your shame." I nodded, but something in my stomach twisted anyway. The courtroom filled again, more people than before. I caught glimpses of phones tucked into coat pockets, notepads scribbling at high speed. Behind the barrier, Rachel sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She smiled when I looked over, but her eyes were wet. The judge called the session into order. The prosecutor stood first. "Today," she said, her voice steady and cold, "we will present direct digital communication between the defendants Charles and Linda Parker that paints a clear picture of premeditated abuse." She clicked a remote and a screen lit up behind her. White text on a black background. "Charles, can't wait to see your face." "Linda, chains ready." I could hear someone gasp. Another person cursed under their breath. My breath caught. Even though I already knew what the texts would say, it was different hearing them aloud, projected into a space where no one could pretend it didn't happen. Next text. "Charles, you sure you locked it tight?" Linda, as tight as her attitude. I closed my eyes for half a second. Burke's hand rested lightly on mine, grounding me. Detective Franklin, the prosecutor, called. He stepped up, stern as ever, holding a folder thick with documentation. "Detective, can you confirm how these messages were retrieved?" "We subpoenaed their phone records and secured a forensic extraction from both devices," Franklin said. "The messages shown are unaltered and verified through digital signatures." "And can you tell the court what physical evidence these texts align with?" Franklin opened the folder and pulled out a photo. "We recovered a chain from the basement. The pattern of bruising on Emily Parker's ankle matches the spacing of the links. Additionally, the padlock was traced back to a hardware store in Oak Ridge purchased using a card belonging to Linda Parker." I blinked. That part I didn't know. "Your Honor, we now call Linda Parker to the stand." A shuffle. A murmur. She walked like her legs were made of wet tissue, barely moving, barely holding up. For the first time, I noticed how much makeup she was wearing. Foundation over under-eye circles blushed too bright on pale skin. It didn't make her look healthy. It made her look like a child playing grown-up. The prosecutor wasted no time. Mrs. Parker, she said, why did you participate in the confinement of your daughter? Linda's voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I didn't want to. I was scared. Charles, he said if I didn't help, he'd turn on me too. So you were afraid? She nodded, eyes beginning to well. And this fear led you to... I just did what he told me, she cried. He made me throw the bread. I didn't want to, but I didn't know how to stop him. And these? The prosecutor clicked again. A screenshot filled the screen. Linda. This'll shut her up for once. Linda. Bet she cries like last time. Should we bet on it? Her face collapsed. The sob that escaped her chest was real, raw, and irrelevant. You were joking, the prosecutor asked. Linda looked at her lap. I didn't mean another click. Another slide. A receipt. Home Depot 2849. Chain heavy duty, 1 unit signed. Linda Parker. The gallery erupted in whispers. A bailiff barked for silence. I stared at the receipt. I don't know why that one hit harder than anything else. Maybe because it was so ordinary. A line item, a product, SKU, a date. It could have been nails or light bulbs. But it wasn't. My mother had bought a chain. With her name. On the screen. For me. She didn't even look up. Not once. The judge slammed the gavel once. Silence. Continue. I didn't move. Gasps in courtroom as a new photo is displayed, one Emily never saw. A chain purchase receipt signed by Linda. It wasn't just a trial, it was a demolition. And the house they built on cruelty came crashing down. I sat in the courtroom, back straight, hands resting in my lap. The leather chair beneath me squeaked with every small shift, but I didn't move. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to absorb everything. The faces, the voices, the truth, as it ricocheted through the air like a wrecking ball. This moment had been building since the first chain clinked against the rusted water heater. Now, the last word was ours. Attorney Burke stood crisp in her navy suit, papers in hand, but she didn't read them. Instead, she looked straight at the jury, her voice steady but sharp enough to cut glass. A birthday chain, she said, pausing, letting the silence gather behind her, should be jewelry, not shackles. There were no gasps, no murmurs, just stillness. A courtroom moment so quiet you could hear the emotional foundation crack. She turned slightly toward the gallery. We are not just here for Emily. We are here because what happened to her should never happen to anyone. And yet it did. Not because she was bad, or ungrateful, or confused, but because 2 adults decided that cruelty was easier than love. Linda slouched in her chair. Charles kept his face stiff, his hands balled into fists, but their silence wasn't power anymore. It was evidence. When Burke sat, she gave me a small nod. Not a smile, this wasn't a celebration. It was something weightier, like passing a torch. The judge gave instructions to the jury. I barely heard them. I was focused on the thrum inside me, the tightness in my ribs, the sound of my own breath. When the jury filed out, Rachel leaned in and whispered, "Whatever happens, you already changed everything." It didn't feel that way yet, but I nodded anyway. We were escorted out a side door and into the swirl of press that had multiplied since the first day. Cameras flashed, questions flew, microphones stretched toward us like desperate hands. Rachel's hand landed on my shoulder. "You don't have to say anything." "I know," I said. "But I want to." She hesitated, then stepped aside. The reporters surged forward. "Emily, do you think the verdict will be guilty? What do you want to say to other kids in similar situations? Are you angry?" I raised my voice just enough to rise above the chaos. "I'm not angry. I'm awake now. And if someone out there is watching this thinking, 'No one will believe me,' you're wrong. I'm proof." That quieted them. Burke led us back inside just as the jury re-entered. I stood when asked. My heart didn't race. It pounded. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman in a tan sweater and thick glasses, didn't meet anyone's eyes. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have." She handed over the sheet. The judge unfolded it, read silently, then cleared his throat. In the matter of State versus Charles and Linda Parker on the charge of felony child abuse, guilty. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment, guilty. On the charge of emotional neglect with intent to harm, guilty. Linda's shoulders shook. Charles didn't move. A date was set for sentencing, but I barely heard it. The words I'd waited my entire life to hear were already echoing through me. Guilty. Outside, the crowd had grown even larger. News vans lined the street. A teacher from my old school waved to me from the steps. I hadn't seen her in years. Back in Rachel's car, I sat with the window cracked as she drove slowly through the reporters who trailed us like shadows. We passed a storefront with the news playing in the window display. The anchor's voice was crisp, practiced. What started in a dark basement may now reach Congress as lawmakers propose the Emily Act, aimed at mandatory reporting for emotional abuse in minors. I leaned back against the seat. It wasn't over. But something had ended, and something else had just begun. He tried to light a fire with words, but I had my own flame now. The house was quiet, almost reverent. Rachel had gone to bed early, her footsteps muffled upstairs. I was alone in the kitchen, wrapped in a hoodie, 2 sizes too big, legs tucked under me on the bench. A single candle flickered in the middle of the table, its wax pooling like slow tears. The digital clock blinked, 11:42 p.m. in tired red numbers. I placed the envelope in front of me. It had been sitting in Rachel's drawer since the day after the trial began. I hadn't touched it. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to give it power. But tonight felt final. Or at least, like the end of the middle. The envelope still smelled faintly of Charles. Cigarette smoke and something acrid like rusted tools. His handwriting on the front was sharp. All caps my name, like an order, Emily. I slid a butter knife beneath the seal and opened it slowly, deliberately, like diffusing a bomb. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper folded once. I unfolded it. Read. "I was hard on you because life is hard," it began. No hello. No apology. Just justification. "You don't get to be soft in this world. You cry too much. You think too much. The world eats girls like you alive." I kept reading. Each sentence was like sandpaper, abrasive, dull, repetitive. "I wanted to toughen you up. I didn't chain you because I hated you. I chained you because I knew the world would." That was the line that almost made me laugh. Almost. There was no remorse. No recognition of damage. Just a man still trying to be right, even in his ruin. I glanced at the candle. Its flame was steady now. Waiting. I didn't fold the letter. I held it over the flame. It caught quickly, too quickly. The bottom curled black, then gray, then ash. I held it until it threatened my fingers, then dropped it into a ceramic bowl on the table. The fire ate the rest. I watched it go without blinking. Behind my eyes, I could still hear his voice. "You think too much." But he was wrong. Thinking was my weapon now. A floorboard creaked behind me. I didn't turn. I knew it was Rachel. "I heard you come down," she said softly. "I needed to see it for myself," I replied. She came to sit beside me, pulled her robe tighter. "What did it say?" "Nothing that hadn't already been burned into me," I said. "But now it's just ash." She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "I'm not his mistake," I said, voice steady. "I'm his reminder." Rachel inhaled sharply, like my words had punched through something inside her. "You're my miracle," she whispered. Silence wrapped around us, not the cold silence of the basement. A warm one, safe, whole. I leaned my head on her shoulder. The candle between us flickered again, casting golden patterns across the wall like fireflies trying to speak. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Do you want me to get that?" she asked. I shook my head and stood, walked to the counter. The screen lit up with a preview. Subject: Congratulations, you've been accepted to our pre-law exploration program, class of 2024. I stared at it. Then I smiled. This wasn't just freedom. It was direction. The chain is gone. But I've kept a piece, not as a wound, as a weapon. Sunlight spilled across the grass like someone had finally remembered to turn the world back on. Rachel's backyard was strung with lights, even though it was broad daylight. A big white tent fluttered gently over the tables, and the smell of grilled vegetables and chocolate frosting drifted from the open patio doors. Laughter filtered from every direction, some of it new, some remembered. It was my 18th birthday. People mingled and clinked glasses, real ones, not plastic. Jasmine from school stood near the punch bowl, chatting with one of my old teachers who'd come by to say she was sorry for not noticing sooner. I didn't blame her. We all build little myths around what we don't want to see. But that was behind me now. I stood by the table with the cake, a towering 5-tiered sculpture of chocolate raspberry decadence, flecked with gold leaf and soft sugar flowers. A real cake. My cake. Rachel walked over, smiling through eyes already glassy with tears. She held a small velvet box, the kind you'd expect to find a ring in. For a second I thought she might cry, but then she straightened and handed it to me. For the girl who turned pain into purpose, she said. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, thin but solid, engraved on the inside, not a mistake. A warrior. I looked at it for a long moment. The engraving caught the sun and shimmered almost like it breathed. I figured Rachel added you could wear this and not feel heavy, but still feel strong. I wrapped it around my wrist. It was cold at first, then warm, weightless but not forgettable. Someone tapped a glass behind us. Burke. She gave me a nod, subtle but proud. I hadn't expected her to come, but she said the final hearing where they'd be sentenced was just a few days away. She'd be ready. And so would I. Speech, someone yelled from across the tent. Come on, Emily. I laughed. It felt good, real. I stepped forward, took the makeshift mic Rachel handed me, just a karaoke setup we'd borrowed from a neighbor, and glanced at the small crowd. Most of them knew pieces of the story. Some had read every headline, but only a few had lived in the silence with me. I never thought I'd have a birthday party. I began, heart-thudding but voice steady. Not a real one. Not one with cake I could eat, or people who wanted to be here. A few people smiled. Others waited, unsure where I was going. But here's the thing, I continued. You can chain a body. Not a voice, not a spirit. Not forever. The air shifted. People leaned in. I used to think surviving was enough. But surviving is just the beginning. You don't rebuild from survival, you rise from it. I saw Jasmine wipe her eyes. I saw Rachel press her hand to her chest. My father said I was a mistake. My mother pretended not to hear him. But today, I get to say something back, and not in whispers. I held up my wrist, the bracelet glinting like a silver flame. This is not a scar. This is steel. And it's mine. The crowd applauded, not the forced, polite kind, but something warmer, truer. Someone cheered. Someone else whistled. A small camera crew moved closer. They'd asked earlier if they could film for a local special, something about survival and policy. I'd agreed. Because hiding is over. The reporter stepped forward. Microphone raised, her voice soft, but clear. Emily, if you could tell people just one thing, just one truth from everything you've endured, what would it be? I looked at her, looked past her, and then looked directly into the lens, unflinching. I used to live in a basement. Now I live with the lights on.